The small, sunlit café was unusually quiet that Thursday morning, except for the occasional clink of silverware and murmured conversations. Hannah sat at a corner table for one, her laptop open but mostly ignored. Her coffee had gone cold, and the half-eaten croissant in front of her was more for show than nourishment. She had been a single mom for nearly 3 years, juggling work, daycare, pickups, and sleepless nights. And yet, here she was, trying to steal just 30 minutes for herself before the world demanded everything else again. The door chimed softly, and a gust of brisk morning air announced the entrance of someone new. Hannah didn't look up immediately. She had perfected the art of avoiding human interaction, but something about the aura that followed the man made her heart skip. He was impossibly tall, impeccably dressed, and carried the quiet confidence of someone who was used to being noticed. As he approached, the café seemed to shrink around him, the ambient noise fading into nothing. He stopped at her table, smiled with a warmth that contrasted sharply with his sharp business attire, and said, almost conspiratorially, "Mind if I join you?" Hannah blinked, momentarily flustered. Actually, I please," he interrupted gently, sitting anyway, uninvited but not unkindly. "I promise I'm not here to disturb your solitude." Something in his eyes, sharp but not predatory, commanding yet gentle, made her hesitate. She had learned to be cautious, to keep strangers at arm's length, but today felt different. Perhaps it was the exhaustion, or perhaps it was a faint, inexplicable pull. "I'm Ethan," he said, extending his hand. "Ethan Caldwell." Hannah shook it, noting how strong his grip was, steady, assured. "Hannah Carter." There was a pause, and then he leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "Pretend I'm your husband." The words hit her like a lightning bolt. She choked on her next sip of coffee, coughing violently. "Excuse me. I know it sounds insane," he said quickly, his eyes twinkling with mischief, "but just for a moment. Pretend I'm your husband. Trust me." Hannah stared at him, the absurdity of the situation colliding with a strange, undeniable thrill. Why on earth would this man walk into her quiet corner of the world and ask her to pretend he was her husband? Her life had been a careful, chaotic balance of work, parenting, and survival. There was no room for unexpected, charming strangers who sounded like they stepped out of a romance novel. "Why?" she demanded, her voice steadier than she felt. "Because," he said, "there's someone in that cafe who needs to think you're not alone today. Someone important. And I happen to be the perfect actor for the role." He pointed discreetly toward a man at the far end of the cafe, a man in a sharp suit with a cold, assessing gaze. "See him?" Hannah's eyes followed his, landing on the figure. Her stomach dropped. That was her ex-husband, Alex, the man who had left her 3 years ago, taking nothing but the satisfaction of control and leaving her to rebuild from scratch. And judging by the way he scanned the room, he was looking for her probably, with an agenda she didn't want to entertain. Ethan lowered his voice again. "I'll handle this. Just go along with it." Hannah felt a mix of disbelief, amusement, and fear. But the spark of hope, the glimmer that maybe she didn't have to face every challenge alone, was too powerful to ignore. "Okay," she whispered, her lips curving into a hesitant smile. "Pretend you're my husband." The transformation was immediate. Ethan adjusted his posture, his arm casually draped near hers, a subtle intimacy that spoke volumes without words. When Alex's gaze landed on them, it flickered confusion, surprise, and finally something that looked dangerously like envy. Alex approached cautiously, his confidence faltering. "Hannah," he said, his tone carefully neutral, "I didn't expect to see you here." Hannah held her head high, her chest puffing slightly with the borrowed strength Ethan radiated. "Alex," she said smoothly, "this is my husband, Ethan. Ethan, Alex." Ethan extended his hand, firm but friendly. "Nice to meet you," he said, and Hannah saw the subtle shift in Alex's demeanor, the arrogance cracking, the power play faltering. For the next few minutes, Alex tried to engage, tried to insert himself into her world as if nothing had changed. But with Ethan by her side, smiling, attentive, protective, every word Alex threw felt small, irrelevant, and impotent. Hannah realized something vital in that moment. She had been underestimating herself, and having Ethan, not just his presence, but his unwavering support, made her realize how much control she actually had. The cafe encounter ended with Alex storming out, muttering under his breath, and Hannah laughing softly, a laugh she hadn't heard in years. She felt a lightness she hadn't known since her divorce, a sense of empowerment that came from having someone believe in her even, if temporarily. Over the following weeks, Ethan's appearances became more than coincidental. He began showing up in small, unexpected ways. A coffee waiting on her desk at work, a note left in her mailbox with just a smiley face and a message, "You're stronger than you know." He didn't overstep, didn't demand, but he was always there, a steady anchor in the chaotic storm of her life. Hannah found herself opening up in ways she hadn't in years, sharing fears, dreams, even quiet moments of joy. She realized that love didn't have to be dramatic to be real. It could be patient, supportive, and understanding. And slowly, Ethan became more than a pretend husband. He became a partner, a confidant, a quiet hero in her life. Conflict arose when Ethan's true identity was revealed. He wasn't just a charming stranger, but the CEO of a company that had just acquired her small graphic design firm. The revelation sent Hannah reeling. She felt betrayed, manipulated, and humiliated. The careful boundaries she had built around her life seemed to crumble overnight. Ethan, however, didn't falter. He apologized sincerely, explaining that the initial encounter in the cafe was spontaneous, driven by instinct rather than strategy. He had been intrigued by her strength, her resilience, and her undeniable grace under pressure. The revelation of his role at her company was coincidental, he claimed. Though Hannah struggled to reconcile her feelings with the reality of the situation, turning the tables became Hannah's silent mission. She dove into her work with renewed vigor, proving her worth not because she had to, but because she could. She presented innovative ideas, spearheaded projects, and earned the respect of her peers and of Ethan himself. She discovered a power within herself she hadn't realized existed. The ability to command attention, inspire loyalty, and lead with authenticity. Ethan watched, admiring from a distance, until one afternoon he approached her office, a rare vulnerability in his gaze. "Hannah," he said softly, "I want you to know, I didn't manipulate you. I admire you, truly, and I want to be with you not as your CEO, not as a strategic partner, but as the man who loves you." Hannah paused, letting the words sink in. She felt the old fear, the fear of trusting, of opening her heart cling to her like a shadow, but it was overpowered by the truth she had discovered about herself. She was strong, capable, and deserving of happiness. The resolution was neither abrupt nor theatrical. It was quiet, intimate, a mutual acknowledgement of growth and love. Hannah and Ethan began a real relationship, one built on respect, trust, and shared joy. Her son, who had watched from the sidelines, embraced Ethan wholeheartedly, sensing the sincerity in the bond between them. The powerful ending came not from grand gestures or dramatic confrontations, but from the quiet triumph of a woman who had reclaimed her life. Hannah stood on the balcony of her small apartment one evening, the city lights twinkling below, her son asleep inside, and Ethan beside her. She felt a deep, unshakable peace. She had faced loneliness, betrayal, and fear and emerged stronger, loved, and unafraid to embrace the future. In the end, the café encounter, a whimsical, almost impossible request, had sparked a journey that transformed her world. Pretending Ethan was her husband had taught her an invaluable lesson. Strength and love often come from the most unexpected places, and courage sometimes begins with the smallest, most daring acts. And as she looked at Ethan, her real partner now, she whispered almost to herself, "I didn't just pretend, I lived it, and I won."